Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Monday edition of Bizapalooza Chat. We are going to have a great chat today because it's about a topic that I know is important to all of you. Maybe it's interesting to you. Maybe this is something that you've been fascinated by. I can tell you that I have. And that is this whole idea of Snapchat and Instagram. When do you do Snapchat? When do you do Instagram? And which should it be? Well, I am very excited because to answer these questions, which I have had for many, many years, I've had the pleasure of meeting the most awesome influencer and Snapchat expert. His name is Sean Ayala. Sean, welcome to Bizapalooza Chat.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on. I think this is really cool that we get to talk about Snapchat and Instagram. I'm definitely really excited about just the stories side of it. So I'm ready to share. So let's chat.
Let's chat. And so first things first, I want to know a little bit about you. I know our audience wants to know a little bit about you. So talk a little bit about who were you before there was Snapchat?
So a little bit about me. So by day, I'm a marketing manager at Best Buy. So I lead a marketing strategy and a creative team. So I am really, my day is really understanding what you guys are trying to go after, right? Strategy, creative, and build brand awareness, whether it's for you or your brand, right? And by night, I'm an award-winning Snapchat interactive storyteller. So I've had the opportunity to work with and partner with brands like the NFL, Fox, Paramount, Lexus, etc., creating some interactive ideas to help bring their brands and their stories to life on the Stories platform. And recently, too, I even did a takeover for, I don't know if you guys are familiar with DocuSign's Instagram account, but that was fun too. So that's what I do by night. And I kind of just try to have fun with it all.
So have you always been a storyteller by nature? And again, how did you express that storytelling part of you before there was Snapchat and Instagram?
So it's funny. Growing up, I love Disney. Two things: Disney and their storytelling. And at the time it was called WWF, Vince McMahon wrestling. And I always had this love for how they were able to create characters and add stories to them and bring them to life, right? So before Snapchat, I kind of dabbled in YouTube and tried to have some fun around creating some stories, just in general, right? Documenting me and doing some things there. But when Snapchat was introduced, and let me add a little bit of context here too, because of Disney, I used to love drawing as well. So I had this creative juice in me that I had when I was young. Got older, right? We all had to get jobs, and I tried to find something in the creative space, and thankfully marketing and design led me to that side of it. But I lost the hand tradition side of it all, where Snapchat brought that back for me. The moment I was able to see that you're able to doodle on an app that can be shared to a lot of your friends, I thought, wow, this was amazing. And that kind of sparked everything for me, just because I used to love to just draw and create.
So talk a little bit about, okay, you're a Snapchat pro, and we're going to get to that. But talk about how you got your feet wet with Snapchat and kind of how you started progressing along the storytelling with it.
So first, I got on Snapchat. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Gary Vee, but Gary Vee was just really talking about this app called Snapchat. And I wanted to, at the time, several years ago, just like many of these platforms, in order to stand out, you really had to figure out how to do something creative. But I felt like it was so saturated. Everyone was everywhere. But Snapchat Um, it was new, it was different, and Gary Vee was talking about it, and I said, let me give it a chance. I hopped on it, and I absolutely hated it. I did not understand, how the app work. I didn't see a news feed. It was, I just couldn't get it. So I deleted the app, and I deleted it for several months until Gary Vee kept talking about it. And I'm like, you know what? This may be my opportunity to get on there and create something. I didn't know what it would be, but I said, let me hop on there and do something. And that's when I found the doodling tool, which kind of changed it. But before that, it was just really trying to find something that I can do to just stand out in this social media atmosphere. Because everything is just so crowded. I was really trying to look for a way to break through.
So did you find that I was an early adopter to Twitter, which is maybe why it's my favorite platform, because one of the benefits that I got was that I felt like I could just like connect with anyone. I'm like terribly shy. So this idea of just kind of being able to ping someone and start a little conversation or whatever, especially when you're an early adopter and not everyone's on the platform. Did you have that kind of an experience with Snapchat? How does the engagement component work?
Well, it's funny on Snapchat. You're literally starting with zero connections. There isn't a function that allows you to discover people, at least at that time, right? Today, there have been some changes on the app that makes it a little bit easier. But in those days, it was really going to Twitter and finding what articles that were out there that, Mashable, who were they talking about? Who were these influencers? And it was really about just following these people. And then once I noticed that, yes, following many people, I get to see what people were doing. But the one thing that stood out to me was that these influencers were creating content that shared their audience. Because I have a big believer that the content you create on Snapchat and Instagram is really not about you. It's about your audience. And they were doing a great job at showcasing their audience, which then allowed me to find more people on the app. Because no one at the time, I didn't have any friends on Snapchat at that time, or anyone that I knew that was on Snapchat. But I was really able to follow or look for people within the app. And then that just kind of snowballed it from there. And I also believe that if you just create content, no matter where you are, with no one watching, someone will eventually watch at some point.
That's really interesting. So I think the part that was confusing to me, at least about Snapchat, I originally thought that when it came out, it was like, these messages that disappear. And yes, that it was a communication platform, almost like a texting platform or something like that. Maybe like Twitter used to be, because I remember now Twitter is about sharing content like a news feed. And it used to be an engagement platform where you could talk to people, which is what we did back in 2006, 7, something like that. Now, both Snapchat and Instagram, you're talking about stories. So maybe you could explain the differences between Snapchat and Instagram, whether it relates to messages or stories. How do you see the platforms are different?
Well, at its core, right, Snapchat is a messaging platform. And it is just an enhanced text messaging platform. So you're able to communicate with friends via text, whether it's a call or whether it's a live in-person or live stream in the app. And then there's this other side of just sharing stories, which is just sharing your day. So at its core, Snapchat is about messaging with the additional feature of sharing your story. Instagram at its core is a photo-driven app. with all the additional bells and whistles, right? Because Instagram and Facebook started copying everything from Snapchat because they saw that there was a new way to communicate out in this social space. So one, Snapchat is pure messaging and sharing your day, and Instagram is photo driven with all the extra bells and whistles that is kind of hard to find and navigate today too, because it's all within the app. It's spread all over the place.
I'm so glad you said that, because that seems obvious, but believe it or not, was not obvious to me.
And another thing too, because even if we talk about demographics, the demographics are somewhat similar. Snapchat skews a little younger, but then the other part of it too that I love to talk about is, yes, Instagram has over 500 million daily active users. And from a stories perspective, it's about, I think the last stat was around 300 million. When Snapchat is, they had some great Q4. They had a great Q4 earnings call, and they're now at 187 million daily active users. But the thing about that is, if you want to know the big difference between the two as well, Snapchat, there's a stat out there that states that Snapchat, 48% of the Snapchatters do not use Instagram. So if you want to get down to just an audience perspective, the audience is unique within the two too.
Wow. Didn't know that. Did not know that. So now let's really talk about crafting stories, because what we want to talk about, and I don't think this matters, does it, whether you're on Snapchat or Instagram, there's a certain way to think about crafting a story, correct?
Yeah, correct. Okay, and I believe it really starts and it begins with just putting structure behind your story, right? Like, I think you should have a beginning, a middle, and an end to your story. Whether you take that to a whole different level, it all begins with just having a beginning. So, have an introduction. So if we want to get down to the basics, have an introduction of what you're about to do, and then have your meat of your story, and then conclude it and end it. And I even like to say that creating micro moments is even better than kind of documenting your day. Right. So think about pieces of your day that you can turn into something fun or creative.
All right. You're going to have to coach me here, right? Because my life is ridiculously boring. I think I heard a comedian say that no generation has done so little and documented so much. Right. So even before you get to the beginning of the story, right? So I have my little phone and I'm like, I'm going to do an Instagram something. I'm going to do whatever. But Sean, I am like, how do you begin thinking, whether you're a small business owner or you're an influencer or whatever, how do you begin thinking about where the story is? What is my story? What should I be looking for? What's my trigger that says, hey, you got a story here?
Well, so the one thing I want to make sure I address is that you do not have to feel compelled or you have to create a story every moment or every day. So get that out of the way. You do not have to feel like you have to pick up that phone and document. Two, I've seen a lot of my success and success from others by posting minimum. So a minimum of once per week. Like, you just want to show up and you want to have a consistent schedule. So I think that's important too, because a lot of small businesses and marketers feel like you gotta just be on these platforms when you don't have to. Just think about a time and a moment of when. So now to get to your point, or your question around, well, how do I even get creative? It's really about thinking about your day. And I tell a lot of people, think about what you typically do all the time, whether it's walking your dog or you're having a meeting with your team, or water cooler conversations. First, think about those things that are recurring throughout your day, throughout your week, throughout your months, and then start thinking about what are the funny things or what is entertaining about those things or what can provide value out of those things. Because yes, fun and entertaining are great, but some people need to be inspired or educated. So think about these moments, and then how can you turn those into a teachable moment, an entertaining moment, a fun moment, and then document it. I even take it down to another level where once I start to identify these moments, I break out a storyboard and I start step by step documenting what I would like my story to become.
Okay, give me a real example. Tell me about something you did. If you haven't done one this week, what'd you do last week?
So one of my favorite stories that I love to create, and this one is far left field, but I'm a big fan of The Walking Dead. I love the show, and what I like to do on Snapchat, because I love to create and draw in the app too. I would create a story that shows walkers, which are walkers are what's the other word for zombies, that are coming after me. So I will actually sketch through step by step, showing frames of walkers coming after me. And the goal in the story is for you to help me survive, help me stay alive. And I like to do a lot of interactive stuff where today a lot of people like to tap these screens to tap through stories. I like to use that against my audience and say, actually tap the screen and save my life. You tap that zombie, that walker, you'll kill it and you'll save me. So I take it more to the extreme with the stories I create. And it's really about the things that I love. I feel like if I'm creating content for the sake of creating content, you're not going to really feel or enjoy what I enjoy. So I create content for myself. And then turn it into something entertaining.
Aha. So you're starting with yourself. Say, I like Walking Dead. Okay. But then like what happens? A bell goes off in your head and you're like, oh, I should have them try to save me. See, those of us who are not that creative, Sean, we need more. Or maybe talk about something that somebody else has done, or like maybe, I don't know. I'm like, what can I do? I want to become a better Snapchatter.
You know, at the end of the day, for me, the most important thing that I want people to think about when creating stories is how can you get your audience to engage? So here's another example that I did with the NFL Chargers. They allowed me to take over their account and just have fun with it. Gave them a storyboard, kind of said, this is what we would like to do, because they have an audience. In my head, it's all about, well, how can we get your audience to create quote unquote user-generated content that will allow your brand to be seen by their audience, and so many others, right? Because you're on these platforms for a reason. And you're either wanting to sell your brand, sell your product, sell your service. So we did something basic and simple. I said, hey guys, we're going to get your audience to doodle on their thumb a Chargers helmet and put a happy face to it. And I created a story that encouraged our audience to send us their pictures that they doodled the helmet on their finger. And that blew them away, not from a creative standpoint, but from the standpoint of there were so many people who wanted to send in their thumb with a Chargers helmet on it. And they got so many that they had to create a page on their website to feature everyone that they couldn't all within their story. So I really think at the end of the day, it's probably not even getting super creative, but it's talking to your audience and getting them to know who you are, engage with you, because people like people, right? People trust people. People want to talk to people. So maybe we're getting too out. We're going too extreme with some creative stories, but I mean, there's some things that you can pull from it, which is probably really around your community.
I think that you've hit on something so very powerful. And that is I work with a lot of Main Street business owners, right? So and what's really interesting is because I work with people on two ends of the spectrum, really large organizations who want to connect with small business owners who want to connect with their customers. And both of these audiences of businesses struggle with the same thing. And that is, I'm going to say they're afraid of showing people who they are. Whether it's legal considerations where a brand has to protect themselves because Lord knows we know things can go wrong, or whether as a small business owner, they want to look professional. And showing people that you like The Walking Dead when you're like a local printer may not like do anything for you.
But it provides more context to who you are, and the things you like. Like and I know people struggle with that all the time. Because even there's this real estate agent that I was talking to, and we were brainstorming ideas. And she's like, well, how do I break through in my community? I'm like, well, what do you like? What do you love? She's like, I love to go to Disney. Why don't you be the Disney real estate agent? Like, for everyone who loves Disney related things. And if you create this story and show that you do love it because you're always at Disneyland or you're doing something Disney, people are going to relate with that side of you and want to be with that Disney real estate person.
Got it. Oh, I think we have a question. There's a question for you, Sean.
Oh.
And the question comes from my friend Esther, who's over at Question Pro, which is like an online survey platform. And she wants to know from you, how much of your audience is on different social media platforms? How can a small business identify these different audiences and customize a story on different social media platforms? So I think she's asking, how do you tweak your story based on where you're at?
Good question. So we're talking about creating micro stories to distribute across many different channels. So it's funny. I always work with one piece of content, and I take the main content, whatever that content is, whether it's Snapchat, if I'm creating for Snapchat, whether I'm creating for YouTube. I am trying to stretch that content as much as I can and find the micro moments within those moments or within that creative to share across all other platforms. So for example, right now, I have a weekly show too that I kind of like post out, and I'm taking segments of that and placing it on stories on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. I am taking pieces of it and will post to Twitter. I am taking pieces of it and will post to Facebook, right? But what was the other piece of that question? I think that I'm missing a piece that I need to answer. Piece.
I think she wants... I'm opening it up. Oh, I had it right there and I have to open it. How can a small business identify these different audiences and customize a story? So if you're going to take, let's say, like you do these different stories, now how do you customize them for like a Snapchat audience, like you said, which was more text based versus an Instagram audience, which is more photo.
Yeah. Well, right. So the thing here too is one, identify where your audience is, right? So know which platforms is worth it, because Snapchat may not be the right thing for you right now. Instagram may not be the right thing for you right now. But first you just need to identify where your audience, where are they at? And once you identify that, then there's a theme in the content you're creating that can be spliced up for all of it. Because it's not about trying to force and create content for each of these platforms. Yes, I agree 100% that the content you create needs to be native to the platform. That I totally understand and get, and you definitely want to do it that way. But once you've identified your audience, the content that you create will speak to the majority of them in all different assets. But the one thing that you do want to do is plan it out beforehand about what you really do need to reflect a Instagram post, to reflect a Twitter post, because it is different for each of them. But I think that belongs in the pre-planning. But back to the audience, you really just got to know you want to be on the right platform for you.
And I think that's such a great point, because we have another question from my friend David Kutcher. I don't know if you know him, but he does all kinds of awesome stuff, like on with Google sites, believe it or not. Super
Very cool.
Interesting guy. Now, he's got a question that's a takeoff on what you and I have been talking about. He said, if this is for small businesses, is spending time on Snapchat time that takes away from doing other tasks? Is this a worthwhile expenditure compared to other activities you could be doing? And if so, why? How much time do you spend on it? And as someone who's got a full-time job that's working with other brands, but you know what I'm saying, with a small business owner, is this what you and I were talking about earlier? So many hours in a day, so many hats to wear. Let's make the assumption that your audience is there.
Yeah.
Right? Let's just make that assumption. And how much time should you spend? What's a good, efficient way of reaching that audience through stories?
Cool. So your audience is there. One or two things can happen. You can actually be on Snapchat without being on Snapchat. So you don't have to feel as if you have to create stories on the platform. You can take advantage of geo filters, right? Which are is location-based art that people place over their images in the Snapchat app. So one, you can actually create geo filters to be on the platform without being on the platform and getting your name out there. You can also place ads on Snapchat, right? Snapchat actually has a great back end ad platform, similar to Facebook, where they have audiences, but it's not as advanced as Facebook. But you can definitely reach your target audience with ads on Snapchat. So you can definitely do that. Or if not, the last resort, if you don't have money for that, for geo filters and or ads, right? Like I said, at the minimum, if you are creating a story at the minimum once per week, whether it's documenting your behind the scenes stuff, people love behind the scenes content because they don't get to see that side of the business or the person, especially if you're a small business. Like, documenting what you're doing is incredible because it gives insight to who you are. But if you're doing that at the minimum once a week and sharing that on other social platforms, one, if you do that for at least a month or two, or maybe 3 months, right, you can start to see if people are interested in your account. And that will tell you whether or not you should continue creating content for that at least once a week.
I am getting you are a popular guy.
Uh-oh.
You are a popular guy. So let me see. I'm writing your answers. And I think I have another question. Yes. Another question, Sean. Question is, oh, right. Yeah. Okay, good. No, it's not a question. It's a comment from Josie Designs. I hope I know. Josie, I'm saying this wrong. I'm sorry. I said that Snapchat was text focused, and she said she heard you say it was messaging focused.
Snapchat.
Yes.
Yes.
Which
text
can occur
messaging
with image and video snaps, although text messaging is part of the platform. Thank you. Okay, got it.
Yeah. And great point. When I say messaging, it encompasses all those things, because you can send a video, you can send a text with all of that disappearing.
Yeah. And that's the kind of other thing that's real interesting is stories stay though, right?
Stories last for 24 hours on all platforms.
And they disappear too. So how does a brand benefit by having content that disappears?
Because it's the fear of missing out. If you have some compelling content that's there that disappears, you're going to want to go and see more later. So it's really that fear of missing out that is really attractive on the Stories platform. So I know a lot of people are like, but we're creating it to disappear. That's okay. You can download that content and repurpose that content on different sites. So don't feel as if you're losing content. It's still another piece of content that you can add into if you're creating evergreen kind of content.
So are there any businesses that should not use Snapchat or stories or anything, that maybe for whom this is not a great platform? Like you should ignore this if.
You should ignore this. Very good question. You should ignore this if, that's a very good question. Like, I always think about the audience. At the end of the day, it's about your audience. If your audience isn't there, don't be there. There will be a time where you do want to be on that platform when your audience gets there. But I think there's a story that can be created from any kind of business, whether you're on a farm with some chickens to a high corporate thing. Like, I think a story can be made out of everything. The only thing I usually say is, if it's something you got to get your legal team to approve, then probably stay away from it for now.
Yeah, right. And from a big brand perspective, you work for a big brand as it is. You work with other big brands on Snapchat. Have you worked with any brands for whom, like, they're really afraid, or they, like you said, I mean, I can't imagine a brand like the NFL not having to go through legal.
Well, so it's funny. All the people that I work with usually have to run something through legal, just because it's about brand reputation too, right? You're trusting someone that isn't part of the company to create something. But like, I can even think about Lexus. Like, Lexus, out of all people, was kind of left field for me. As Lexus on Snapchat, interesting. They gave me the opportunity to launch their Snapchat account. So I was the first person to get on their account and create a story. That was interesting in itself, because we did not know whether or not that Lexus customer would be on the platform.
That's what I'm saying.
But sure enough, we created a story that encouraged the audience to show off their cars. These Lexus owners love their cars and are willing to take pictures to show it off. And I think on apps like Snapchat and Instagram, where everyone is trying to be discovered or trying to be seen, especially with stories, you have an incredible opportunity to showcase your community in a way that will give them reasons to create content for you to be seen. So, I think about, if it's not about stories, it's about how do you showcase your audience in a story.
What if you just talked about to launch their Snapchat account? By virtue of being Lexus, did they automatically have 1 million people following them?
No, they did not, actually. They used all of their internal, whether it's email, they used Facebook, they used Instagram to promote. So they used all their other social channels and internal channels to promote that they were on Snapchat, to see whether or not they would get enough people to the platform to allow them to continue create content on Snapchat. And sure enough, when we launched, we were pretty impressed with the amount of users that were who were adding the account. And to this day, Lexus still create content on the Snapchat. They found the value in it.
Fascinating. Okay, I have many things I can ask you, but now we've gone off my script. Let's talk about tracking results, because you just talked a little bit about that. You talked a little bit about, so what are some of the different ways that you can track results either on Snapchat or Instagram when you're dealing with stories? What kind, what is it that we're looking for to tell us that we're going to be successful?
There's probably one thing, a basic thing that everyone usually defaults to, which is okay, is retention rate. Because when you're creating these stories, you want to make sure people are watching it all the way to the end. And finding retention rate is pretty simple. It's taking the amount of views of your first snap in your story, and dividing that by the last snap in your story, and you get a retention rate. Sometimes I usually say anything over 60% is really good, because that means your audience were engaged and they enjoyed it. But I like to take it a step further. I like to go deeper and say it's not about the retention rate. It's about the actual engagement and how many people are commenting that they like the story. How many people are, based on your call to action, is sending you what you're asking for. And I take that as the most important thing, because at the end of the day, it's about, and I know I'm being a little repetitive with this, but it's about your community, and it's about providing value, and it's about showcasing them. Ultimately, you want them to be loyal followers. You want them to be brand ambassadors. You want them to know and trust, and buy from you ultimately when you're ready to sell something.
What you mentioned, I think, I don't know if you mentioned calls to action, or if you mentioned, we want people to do something, but my question for you is, can you put links in there? Can they follow links? What are different things that you can ask people to do? Because you talked about sending us pictures and things like that. How does that work?
Oh, yeah. So the recent, probably within the last 3, 4, 6 months, Snapchat gave everyone the ability to add links. So now today, if you go to my story, I'm talking about my news, you can swipe up and I'm linking you to YouTube. So I'm giving you the full video on YouTube, which that in itself, swiping up and adding a link to either your products, your services, or a product page is huge on Snapchat. So that, and you can do that to anything. So, and let me step back a little bit, because call to actions can be telling them to go to a specific web page, right? My favorite call to actions is asking them a question. What did you think of today's story? Or in the case of The Walking Dead, did you save my life, right? And then people starts to send you these interesting images of themselves, whether they're drawing a walker behind them, or they're drawing that they've been cut or hurt. But it's really around that type of engagement. So then there's those type of call to actions. So there's questions, there's links, and I think those are really, because it's really about the question you ask and what you want them to do. So
they can actually, inside your story, they can actually, quote unquote, comment with another image, like in the Chargers example.
And that's where I originally said Snapchat is like a messaging platform, because once you ask that question, they can send you a text saying, I saved your life, or they can send you an image with a doodle on it if they wanted to, right? Say, complimenting whatever your story is, or they can send you video, and then you can actually take that and repurpose it into your story, which I think is the key for any stories platform, is repurposing the content into your story.
Got it. That is starting to make sense. And I really love that you are referencing the core application of the platform, because one of my marketing peeves is what, I always say, if we marketers like to piss in our own pond on a daily basis, we will bastardize any platform and just totally kill its soul, right?
It's what we do best.
And when and I love how you talked about Snapchat is a messaging platform. As part of a messaging platform, the idea is that you engage with people, you ask them questions, they give you responses, and to have that relationship that you might never have with a brand per se.
Exactly. And it's easier to do it on Snapchat than it is on Instagram. I mean, Instagram still is about photos, right? You want to make these pretty pictures stand out. But Snapchat, um, with their stories component, I mean, stories was introduced second. It was really about a messaging platform. That's what it was. And then stories became part of it. But with stories, now you're able to share your day, right? Or share a cool story or something entertaining. You still want to bring back what the core of Snapchat was into it all. So that way you are really building relationships. And you can definitely do and build relationships on Snapchat in a way you can't on other platforms, because it's a messaging at its core, a messaging app.
What are some other things that you could do on Snapchat that you can't do anywhere else? Let's take off on that.
Let's see. Because the cool thing that I like with Snapchat, and I've done this for a while too, and you can do this anywhere, but you can do real time ask me anything on Snapchat, because you got people messaging you on the backside, and then you're creating a story answering their questions. So it's really that one-on-one dynamic that you can have immediately with your audience. And yes, it's replicatable now in Instagram to a certain extent, but it's just not as simple to achieve.
So how is the Ask Me Anything? Let's say I'm more familiar, let's say, with a Facebook Live. Like, this is going on Facebook Live and people could be asking us questions there. They happen to be asking on Twitter, but you see how that's working, right? We're engaging and people are asking us questions. So is it similar to that in a way?
It is. You're right. Facebook Live, yes, it is similar in a way.
But it's shorter.
Because that is real time. Yep. Facebook is real time. Snapchat is you're creating content that will last for 24 hours. So it's probably more effective on Facebook. But then the difference too with Snapchat is you can take your answers or your comments from your friends and add it back into the story. Versus Facebook, you can't, it's all on a comment. So makes sense. But great connection piece there.
Yeah, I think that's really, really interesting. And I think that let's kind of take the same question of what can you do with Snapchat that you can't do anywhere else. And I'm going to push you to twist your mind. And let's talk about, because the one thing Snapchat truly does that no other platform does is make its content go away in 24 hours. And I am hung up on this thing about, I'm hung up on two areas. One is leveraging that piece. And second is you have to have an audience there. So you talked about how Lexus, I guess I have people following me, but I haven't posted anything in a long time. So I have a very dead profile on Snapchat, let's say, versus Twitter, right? Okay. So if I wanted to come back to Snapchat, if I wanted to make a commitment to it, how do you revive your content? How do you leverage it only lasts for 24 hours piece? Or those two different questions, very different.
Well, and again, to the 24 hours question, Instagram stories last 24 hours as well, right? Oh, so you're creating content that will ultimately vanish. But to revive yourself, I think it's really about you understanding too, where do your audience love to consume content, right? Because some people love to consume it only on Snapchat, some only love to consume it on Facebook. And to give you some context too, I remember it was, here, let me double check, with Facebook, the amount of Snapchatters, the percentage of Snapchatters who are not on Facebook, it's about 40%. But then if I think about Twitter, right? Twitter, there is about 80% of Snapchatters who do not use Twitter on any given day. So there's this huge gap of an audience that you potentially can get in front of from a Snapchat perspective. But again, it's a different audience. So it may not be the right audience, but for you to revive yourself, if you wanted to, it's really about blasting out there the message that I am on Snapchat and seeing who will convert over. The cool update that Snapchat just released too, because sometimes it's not about just telling people you're on Snapchat. It's not about posting that little QR code and saying, I'm on Snapchat, come follow me. It's really about showing them what kind of content will they get, right? Snapchat just released this new share function, and it's not opened up to everyone yet. So maybe this is a wrong example, but you're able to share your stories out to other social platforms. But in your case too, I would recommend create a story. It will be different from any other post you have out there, unless you're creating like a YouTube style story. But you create that story, you download it, you post it to all these networks and say, this is the kind of content you're going to see on Snapchat, which is the behind the scenes or some fun, entertaining or comedic type of videos.
Got it.
So that way you're giving them a specific reason to go over there, which they can experience you in a different way.
Okay, so one of the things that I find completely fascinating is that you're talking about this audience overlap or lack thereof.
Yes.
So I don't want to put you on the spot, but like what is the profile of the typical Snapchatter? So if our folks watching this wanted to say, is Snapchat for me? What could you tell us about Snapchatters in general? Like,
Yeah, in general. And so Snapchat is a young audience. 63% of the total audience on Snapchat. I'm sorry. No, that's correct. 63% of the users on Snapchat is between the ages of 18 and 34. So if that is your audience, I would be all in on Snapchat, especially when it's 187 million daily active users. And to put it in perspective too, and I haven't checked the current recent stats for Twitter, but 187 million daily active users on Snapchat is greater than the daily active users on Twitter. Did I say that correctly?
Wow. Didn't know that.
So there's a huge audience over there, but if your target audience is between the ages of 18 and 34, 63% of that audience lives on Snapchat today.
Men, women, mix?
It leans more heavily on women too. Yeah.
I love how I spelled women. Women. I love that.
Yeah. The last time I read it too it was like 70, I want to say around 70% is women. And to even add some more context on this demo too. So 63% is between the ages of 18 and 34. They spend about 30 minutes plus on this app. So if I think about ads and maybe even like dedicating some time to create content on there, is if they're spending 30 minutes watching stuff on Snapchat, there's a possibility you may be seen. And this person is also opening the app over 25 times a day. I mean, there's not a lot of apps being opened that many, maybe Facebook. But I mean, they're just because of this audience, they're pretty unique to Snapchat.
What gets them so addicted to the thing? Because I think I heard an NPR story where like this guy had these teenage girls and he was they were doing the Snapchat thing. And he talked a lot about like what you were saying is that they could create stories faster than he could like type his address. I mean, it was incredible. What is it about, I don't know what I want to ask. What is it that has them so addicted to the platform? What are they getting? What are they wanting?
Exclusivity, meaning one, you're watching your friend's story and you don't see any ads, right? There isn't things to distract you. It is when you're watching you or your friends, they are taking over the entire screen. So it's an intimate thing. And the other piece of it is not anyone can follow you. Not just anyone can follow you, right? You can create it where you're setting up certain people to see your content. And I think that's what's really interesting too, is that you're on a site where your parents or your grandparents can't really just get on there and follow you and watch what you're doing, right? So I really think it's that secretiveness to it that really gives it a high for certain people.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What is your advice to people who should be on Snapchat but aren't? What's your advice to, like, whether you want getting started, what kind of things should you do? How should you, all that stuff?
At the minimum, the first thing, if anyone is not on Snapchat, right, but you need to be there, follow as much influencers as you can. And the reason why I ask is, and I would say, don't even follow brands, right? Follow influencers. Nothing against brands, but the influencers understand how to create and communicate with the audience on this platform. They've been doing it the longest. They even understand how to create stories that are compelling to get their audience to engage. So if you're spending some time just to watch these influencers or storytellers, you will be able to pick up some incredible ideas that you can incorporate into your next story. And I'm a big component of and steal is the wrong word here, but lack of a better term, I'm going to use steal. Steal their ideas and create them into your own ideas to help turn your stories into something creative. So one, I would just begin there. Go to Google, type in Snapchat storytellers. I have the pleasure to create content and work with a girl called Cyrene Q, who is probably one of the top Snapchatters on the platform today.
How do you spell that?
CYRENEQ. So she's known as Cyrene Q on Twitter.
Oh, who else? Give us more people and tell us why.
She started this website called the11thsecond.com, where she features the community, which is really awesome and impressive. So she features the community. She shows off what the community is doing, who's doing great stuff, what kind of stories are being told on Snapchat. So it's a great resource for you to go to kind of see what other people are doing in the Snapchat community. Sean Duras, so Honduras, but with an S in front of it, creates some incredible stories as well. He's worked with many brands. So he's someone I would definitely follow. If you're a small business, like I think of Chris Strub, he does some incredible stories and documenting his life on Snapchat, which is really fun to see. And there's a gentleman called Diddy Rio, does some fun things on Snapchat. And then one of my friends called Carlos Gill. He's always documenting and doing some creative behind the things stuff on Snapchat as well, which is fun. And he does a lot of things on Instagram as well. But at the minimum, follow people, right? Follow, understand how they're using the platform, so that way you can incorporate it into yours, because it's different than Facebook. Snapchat is different than Instagram. It is a different beast altogether.
That is some great advice, Sean. And with that, I think I'm going to leave it right there, and we will tell everyone to get over on Snapchat, do what Sean is talking about. In the show notes, I'm going to try to get a list of all these people that he's mentioned, so you can head over there and check them out yourself on Snapchat. I know that's what I'm going to be doing. So thank you for being here. Another fun week on Bizapalooza Chat. I'm so excited about Snapchat, Instagram, and stories. Sean, thank you so much for being here.
Well, I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to chat Snapchat and Instagram today. It's an untapped source still to get in front of this really high engaged audience. So if your audience is there, please take some time to check it out.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.